Even so, they could not fight much longer, and Fenrir stood before them once again. Despite being severely injured and not having much strength left, Ruth asked the girls to use their magic to help Marius and Lilia while he tried to continue fighting. Nin was worried about Ruth because he had no shield for protection, but he reassured her that he could still use his abilities. So, he had to give it a try. He began to withstand the attacks, but without the shield's protection, the blows felt much stronger and as if his bones were being pierced. Despite this, Ruth did not think of giving up. However, he noticed that the wolf started to prepare a wind spell. This made him afraid, but the monster was unable to cast the spell because it was also too weak. Ruth felt somewhat relieved, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to harm it in such a condition and thought that he should retreat. Then Lily said that they should not give up, so she asked Nin and Luna to cast spells while she would stand at the front with Ruth. She would do it by joining her sister because they had to take advantage of the monster's very weak state. Ruth was a bit worried, but he decided to trust her and promised to protect her. He began to withstand the increasingly painful attacks. Although he was hit and received wounds, Nin healed him while Lily, combined with her sister, started fighting the wolf. Ruth intervened just as she was about to be hit and said that although she had the same movements when her sister controlled the body, her attacks were very predictable and thus the wolf avoided them. Lily apologized because she rarely controlled the body, and Ruth asked her to fight as she knew, not trying to match her sister, but in the way she felt she should, while he continued to protect her. But each time, he felt more pain in his body until his head hurt badly and he felt his strength draining. Ruth wondered what he could do and remembered that he was the one who brought them there, so he had to endure as best he could, even if it meant fainting from the pain. At that moment, he saw Marius and remembered that he had managed to create a shield with his mana, so he thought that if he could use that technique, he could last a little longer. At that moment, he was attacked by Fenrir, and without time to think, he tried to use the technique, successfully creating a shield just in time to avoid injury. This surprised him but also made him happy. He then decided to use more mana and created a stronger shield, which made him feel better and the pain in his body started to disappear. Additionally, his movements became faster and he felt more energized. The wolf began to attack faster, wanting to finish them off, and Ruth started to distract it. Then he gave an order to Lily, who appeared from behind the monster and with her sword created a burst of magic. Ruth was surprised to see Lily using magic. Lily used her sword by combining elements to create a barrier that prevented the monster from moving. Then, Lily charged her sword with 4 elements and, using all her magical power, she attacked Fenrir, piercing him while the 4 elements created a powerful explosion that destroyed the monster's form, revealing the true form of Diana's guardian. Exhausted, Lily fell, but Ruth managed to catch her and thanked her for everything she had done. However, Lily reminded him that they were a team, and it was thanks to their cooperation that they managed to defeat the enemy. Ruth let Lily rest and decided to speak with the Guardian. The Guardian thought Ruth would deliver the final blow, but Ruth wanted to know a few things first. So, he asked about the rune that could grant wishes, and the Guardian gave it to him without hesitation. Then, Ruth asked if there were more demon kings and what their plans were. The Guardian replied that there were many demon kings, but he didn't know the exact number as he wasn't very close to them. Additionally, many demon kings planned to destroy the world, which was why there were so many indestructible labyrinths. However, in his case, he just enjoyed fighting strong warriors. Even so, he admitted he was very surprised to be defeated. Ruth was glad to know that the Guardian's intentions weren't too bad and made an offer for him to join his group. Ruth planned to defeat all the demon kings threatening his world, and to achieve that, he needed the strongest in his team, and the Guardian would be very helpful. The Guardian suggested it would be better if he became his servant so he would have to obey all his commands. But Ruth replied that he didn't force anyone, and if the Guardian wanted to be part of his group and fight strong enemies, it had to be of his own free will. The Guardian chuckled at Ruth's attitude because he had never met a human like that, but he eventually decided to accept the offer. Ruth was happy to know that he was now part of his group, although he felt a bit uncomfortable when the Guardian asked him to carry him that night. Ruth, along with his group, announced their victory in the city's labyrinth in a ceremony. In return for the map of each floor and information about the monsters, Ruth requested an alliance between the clans. The leaders of both clans accepted the offer because of a promise they had made earlier, and Ruth happily decided to return to his city. However, they did not inform the other clans that they had recruited the labyrinth's guardian. The next day, while traveling by carriage, Lily woke Ruth up. While everyone was resting, Lily once again thanked Ruth for everything he had done in the labyrinth because thanks to him and the words he had said, she became much stronger. As a token of gratitude, Lily gave him a kiss on the cheek, which surprised Ruth. A few days later, they returned to the city, and Ruth gave the rune to Manisha to use as she wished. Manisha used it and felt better than ever, then thanked the Guardian for the stone. She promised to provide all the food the Guardian wanted to make him feel comfortable there, which made the guardian very happy as he greatly enjoyed human food. After a few days, Ruth spoke with his sister, who read out some requests from the villagers. Many of them complained about the adventurers and the condition of the roads. Manisha handed these requests to Ruth for him to read and then continued with her work. Ruth felt better seeing his sister full of energy, but he started reading all the requests. Knowing that they still had many problems to solve in their village, Nin suddenly came asking for help with a girl who had fainted. They approached, and Luna took responsibility for healing her with her magic. Our hero saw that the girl was a homunculus, and a few seconds later, the girl woke up. As soon as she woke up, the girl jumped to Luna and begged for help because her friends were in danger after being attacked in the forest. Nin proposed to leave immediately, and our hero agreed, asking Luna to stay with the girl to make her feel safer. Our hero ran through the forest and approached the labyrinth he controlled. However, he didn't believe that his monsters had escaped from the labyrinth because he hadn't given them permission. When our hero arrived at the place where some homunculi were fighting each other, he and Nin stopped, not knowing which side to help. Then, they found that there were two factions. One group appeared more frightened while the other acted like robots. Our hero protected a girl who was almost attacked and told her that her friend went to seek help. He asked what happened and why they were fighting. With a bit of fear, the girl confessed that they were homunculi from Brunes, but the others were combat homunculi specially designed in the city, meaning they came from the same country as Luna and only followed their leader's orders, so they had no feelings or free will compared to them. Our hero asked Nin to heal the others while he thought about what to do because although they were homunculi, they might be like Luna. But now he knew he had to defeat them and began to defend with his shield from their attacks. At that moment, Ammon arrived and told him that although they seemed alive, they were actually like dolls. Our hero then cut off one of the homunculus arms, but it didn't stop, and the homunculus continued to attack. So our hero knew he had no other choice but to eliminate them by cutting their runes. With his sword, he began eliminating all those who attacked him, and in a short time, he managed to defeat them and make them disappear. After that, he went to see the others and explained that their friends were at their clan's house. If they wanted, they could go there, but he knew in his mind that it wouldn't be easy to convince them because they looked at him with suspicion, which he already expected since they might have gone through many bad experiences. The girl who spoke with our hero earlier asked if there wouldn't be any problems when they went because they didn't trust humans much, but many of their friends were hurt and weak, so they had no other choice. Our hero promised that they would feel better there, and after a few hours, all the children were at the clan's house, eating and relaxing, even some of them talking a lot with Luna. Nin asked Ruth what they would do now because they couldn't accommodate everyone there as the villagers would start gossiping. Besides, they had to talk to the city leader to inform what happened in the neighboring country. Our hero is convinced that this leader will help resolve the situation. And then a girl named Fair wakes up to tell our hero that she will accompany him because she knows that he will be speaking with someone important in the village, and she believes it would be better if she could speak for her friends. Our hero warns her that it will not be easy and she might be judged for who she is, but the girl does not mind and is willing to go, promising to share as much as she can. To help her friends, after a while, they go out and people start gossiping when they see Ruth with the girl. They wonder if she is a homunculus or what she is doing with Ruth. Ruth apologizes to her for what people are saying and explains that in his village they have never seen a homunculus, which is why they are reacting this way. Phil reassures him by saying that they were prepared for this because when they left their country, they knew they would face situations like this. They then continue their journey and arrive at the city leader's place. There, they explain the entire situation, and the leader thanks them for telling the truth. He knows that homunculi have suffered quite a lot and does not believe that the neighboring country did this because he only heard some rumors, but thought they were not true. Ruth asks if they can protect the homunculi in their city, though the leader does not know how to protect them all. Ruth explains that they can work like ordinary people. This would help because the city needs more labor now since there are many adventurers. The leader knows this is true, and after seeing Fair, he realizes that they are almost like humans in the way they think and express themselves. Then he asks the girl how the Brunels could create such advanced homunculi. The girl replies that all of this is because 20 years ago a demon king named Grit appeared in the city. She does not know how the demon king appeared, but since his arrival, the technology to create homunculi has greatly advanced. Now the demon king is creating more homunculi like him, also creating various types of homunculi. The city leader is very grateful for this information and tells them that he will speak with the royal capital so they are aware of this situation. He also promises Fair that their city will protect all homunculi and treat them like ordinary people. On the way out, Ruth talks to the girl who is happy to be accepted in the city. Then Ruth asks about the girl she protected while they were fighting. The girl explains that the girl is their leader and a very good fighter, although she does not like to socialize much. Like the others, she does not particularly like humans. However, now with Ruth, they realize that not all humans are bad and they can live a little better. When they return to the others, Ruth explains that now they will stay in the city and can work. He then asks what they can do or where they have experience. They say that they do not know much and have little knowledge, only knowing how to cook, make clothes, make weapons, and build an entire village, but nothing more than that. Ruth is surprised to learn that they know a lot of things and understands that they were forced to work, seeing their concern because they believe they will be forced to work again. He explains that here they will work with rest time and only a few hours. They are surprised to learn that they can work a little, and Ruth says that the work schedule has not been confirmed, but he does not believe it will be very demanding. He also thanks them for being willing to work, which surprises the homunculi because they have never received thanks for their work. Ruth then gathered with Nin and Manisha, where they agreed that the best course of action was to start by building public baths because many adventurers had an unpleasant odor, which had become one of the complaints in the city. Manisha went to submit the proposal to the city leader, while Nin asked Ruth if he was aware that Luna was very different. Since the homunculus arrived, she had been very close to them and hardly spent any time with the other clan members, as if she felt connected to them. Ruth knew he couldn't tell Nin the truth about Luna and decided to look for her. After a while, he found her in the fields and approached her to talk. He then asked why Luna was so close to the others and if she had told anyone that she was also like them. Luna explained that she was just curious and wanted to know more about her origins. Besides, she denied telling anyone because she didn't want to cause problems for Ruth. She felt very fortunate to be protected by Ruth, who was glad to see the girl feeling good and knowing that she could reveal her identity to others. However, Luna had no intention of doing so until people no longer feared the homunculus. That way, she could truly be happy. After talking with the girl, Ruth decided to go speak with Ammon, who greeted him very enthusiastically. Ammon shared that he was now teaching the young children in the village about magic, hoping that some of them might one day become great wizards or even demon kings. Ruth took this opportunity to ask what Ammon knew about the demon king, Grit. Ammon admitted that Grit was someone very obsessed with research. Ruth explained that the homunculus were his creation, and Ammon was not surprised because Grit had long sought the ultimate power, although he had never achieved it. So, he might be experimenting with the homunculus as a hobby because the demon king cannot die and needs something to pass the time. Ruth was furious to learn that the suffering of the children created by Grit was just a hobby for him. Ammon explained that the ultimate power Grit sought would not come from the homunculus because that power actually belonged to Ruth, who could level up thanks to the demonic power of mana and also had the magical power of a shield. Ammon discovered that Ruth could master this power because he used it during their fight. Ruth then asked if Grit was in one of the labyrinths, as he planned to defeat him. However, Ammon warned that Grit was not a weak person and his experiments made him very dangerous. In those labyrinths, the monsters consumed mana, and if Ruth didn't know how to use it, he would be eaten by them and become one of them. However, Ammon also told him that if Ruth could learn to use mana perfectly, he could even become a demon king. Ruth refused to be interested in becoming a demon king, and afterward, Ammon left because he had to teach. Ruth continued walking, thinking that he had to become very strong if he wanted to defeat Grit. His thoughts started to spiral out of control with anger, and he heard a voice saying that he must get rid of it. Our poet was shocked and tried to find out who said it, but he was even more surprised when he saw that there was no one nearby who could have spoken those words. After a few days, the construction of the public toilet was progressing very well thanks to the hard work of the children who worked with great rhythm and high enthusiasm. Although at first, some people felt uncomfortable seeing so many homunculi, they gradually started to get used to it. Some even admitted that they had done a good job in the city, so everything was going well. Meanwhile, our hero trained in using his mana in the labyrinth because he had to learn to control his power well if he wanted to defeat Grit. He also knew that the Demon King would try to kill him to gain his power, so he had to prepare himself as best as possible, even though he knew he still had a lot to learn. Then he decided to return to Nin and Lily who, along with Marius, had obtained a baby monster and fairy. They thanked our hero for allowing them to use points to get their friends. Meanwhile, Marius was a little jealous because the monsters in the labyrinth preferred Ruth, something that did not happen when he was in charge. After a few days, they arrived at the opening of the public toilet. Our hero saw that there were still people who felt a little uncomfortable with the fact that the toilet was built by some homunculi. However, there were some adventurers who were eager to enter, and together with them, our hero decided to go in and be the first to enjoy it. Meanwhile, the girls also went in to enjoy the bath. Although they did not understand why Luna did not want to join them and thought that Luna was shy because there was nothing to cover herself with, they still enjoyed the bath together and joked around. Meanwhile, Manisha watched them with great joy because it had been a long time since she could share with people so close and feel so good. While they were talking, they heard voices coming from the men's bath and found it strange that they were shouting so loudly. However, the adventurers were apologizing to our hero because they just wanted to make a small hole to peek, but our hero did not allow it because his sister was also there. He asked Marius what he was doing trying to peek. Marius admitted that he was not interested in seeing the girls, but he really liked the tense atmosphere that had formed. Our hero couldn't stand it when one of the boys said that he wanted to see Manisha, and he jumping to strike it. Meanwhile, the girls listened to the debate about who was better, especially when our hero told the children they should be content with just imagining it. Our hero spoke with a few people who were still a bit worried, but they were surprised to hear how well the adventurers spoke about the public toilets because they had hot water and soap. This piqued their curiosity, and they decided to give it a try. Meanwhile, the girls came out and were not very happy after hearing the comments made by our hero. Just then, Marius arrived and said that imagining it was a good idea, which made them even more upset. However, after a few days, people were more confident, and the distance between them and the homunculi had significantly decreased. Then, our hero went to congratulate the children on their good work. At that moment, he received a notification from an adventurer that a horde of monsters was heading towards the village. Our hero immediately went to the clan hall where all the adventurers were gathered. With the information he had, he asked them to be strong because they would face a large wave that the guards couldn't handle. Therefore, the Adventurers Guild would reward those who managed to kill the most monsters, and it was their responsibility to protect the town. However, they had to remember that they were not weak, because their clan was the only one that had conquered the labyrinth in the neighboring town. After the speech, the adventurers became motivated and went out to fight. Meanwhile, Ruth talked to the girls about what they would face, although he was confident they would be fine. Marius and Ammon arrived and said they believed they knew where the wave came from, thinking it originated from a new labyrinth producing so many monsters that it was now sending them out in waves. Ruth was surprised that this happened, but he knew they had to protect themselves. Then, the young men who had been previously protected by Ruth came to help, wanting to repay the favor. Ruth accepted the help because any assistance was valuable. Together, they headed to the front of the town. After some time, they managed to build some defenses and got ready. Then they saw the wave approaching, and some were scared because the number was more than 300. Ruth encouraged them, and the mages and archers began to attack, taking down some monsters. However, they saw that the goblins could also use magic, launching spells that frightened some adventurers again. At that moment, Marius arrived with two twin girls who had joined forces. Ruth was happy to see them and decided to be the first to strike, successfully provoking all the goblins. He used his mana to enhance his abilities and managed to defend himself even when attacked from behind. However, Ruth had mastered his mana so well that he could detect anything around him, which impressed Nin and Ammon, who didn't expect him to be that strong. Then all the adventurers and clan members started eliminating the monsters, managing to defeat them all in a short time, and were amazed by Ruth's resilience and strength. Nin returned Ruth's shield, who still thought there were more monsters in the newly created labyrinth. At that time, an adventurer reported that more monsters were approaching and that the second wave was imminent. Everyone was terrified, but Ruth asked them to believe that they would win, no matter how difficult it was. At the same time, the adventurer returned, shouting that more monsters were coming, and from another side, monsters from the Avantia labyrinth were also approaching. All the adventurers were scared because they were surrounded, but the monsters kept advancing and started fighting against the others. This surprised them, and Ruth knew that reinforcements had arrived, because with the fairy girls, he had given them a mission to duplicate the monsters from their labyrinth to come and help. So, with them, Ruth began the second attack, successfully provoking the ogres while his allied monsters didn't let them get hurt. This surprised all the warriors as they had never seen anything like it before. After some time, they managed to win thanks to Ruth, who received all the praise from both the homunculi and the adventurers. However, many people also came to thank everyone who had protected them from the attack. Ruth spoke with Ammon, who acknowledged that he had fought well and that bringing monsters from their labyrinth was a good idea. But Ruth said they must focus on conquering the new labyrinth because the next wave of attacks could come unexpectedly. Ammon agreed because he could do it again and acknowledged that this new labyrinth must be Grit's work, as he felt his mana nearby and it wouldn't be strange if he was behind the attacks with those monsters. Ruth was furious when he found out that Grit was the mastermind behind all those attacks, and his mana began to unleash, while the other Ruth became more determined, saying they had to go conquer the labyrinth. Ammon asked what he would do after defeating Grit and whether he would recruit him to the team. Ruth didn't feel it was the right thing to do because Grit had done many terrible things, and the homunculi also didn't want him near them. Then Ammon said there was an option and showed two bracelets capable of suppressing the abilities and power of a demon king. That would be very useful. Ruth thanked him, and Ammon replied that he did it because he liked living in this village and didn't want to leave so soon. Marius, on his part, told Ruth that they should go immediately. But Ruth asked Marius not to come along because knowing what Grit had done, he would most likely continue sending attacks to the city. So, Marius, as the deputy leader of the clan and a friend of the adventurers, had to stay and protect Bancha. Moreover, the monsters would understand his orders and needed someone they trusted to protect their home while he was away. Marius agreed to help because he also wanted to stay in this city, and Ammon promised to help with his magic. Ruth thanked everyone and told Ceponime to come along because he saw that Ceponime fought very well. Then he explained to all the warriors and adventurers that he would go to conquer the labyrinth with his group. So, he asked them not to be afraid anymore and to defend the city with all their honor. After walking for a while, Ceponime asked if they would meet Grit in the labyrinth. Ruth replied that it was very likely and asked if Ceponime knew him. Ceponime replied that all the homunculi knew Grit, and Ruth asked her not to push herself too hard while Luna remained silent after hearing those words. The whole group managed to enter the labyrinth but arrived in a room that seemed empty. This surprised Ruth as he didn't see any monsters at all. Then he asked the girls to detect any presence. However, they revealed that there wasn't a single monster near them, and there was also no door to another floor. Ruth was puzzled that this was the only floor. Then he felt a strong mana presence. A portal appeared in front of them, and Grit came through, introducing himself and asking them not to be too harsh on him. After the introduction, Grit felt it was unnecessary because they already knew him. Ruth ordered him to close the labyrintho, or they would end his life. Grit laughed at this, saying it wouldn't happen. Ruth said they had already defeated the monsters he had sent, and now it was Grit's turn. But Grit just laughed and showed an even larger army of monsters heading toward the city. Ruth became angry and tried to approach the Demon King, but someone held him back to calm him down for a moment. Ruth eventually calmed down and told the demon that his monsters wouldn't be able to destroy the city, but Grit was confident they could because he had nearly unlimited points, and it was only a matter of time before they all fell. Ruth said he would defeat Grit first, but Grit just laughed, ignoring him. Then he spoke to Luna. Grit was very curious because there were 2 homunculi in their group. Luna stepped forward, surprising all the girls because no one knew about that secret. Luna apologized and told Grit that there was nothing wrong with being a homunculus, but the Demon King was delighted because she had progressed significantly compared to all the other homunculi. He was amazed by what she had learned in the outside world. Therefore, he proposed that Luna return with him. But Luna drew a dagger, refusing because her only master was Ruth. The girls asked why they hadn't been told before, but they waited for a good answer while protecting Luna. Then Grit, in a very epic manner, removed his glasses and transformed into his original form, stating that he had to claim what was rightfully his by force. He then attacked Ruth quickly, who was shocked by the power of his attack, but with increased mana, he managed to push him away. Lilia tried to attack, but Grit dodged her. When Ceponime tried to attack him, Grit blocked her attack and then struck her down to the ground. Ruth went to check if she was okay, and she got up while Lilia continued to fight Grit. The girl said she protected him with her shield, but there was no need to waste it on her because she was just a homunculus and it didn't matter if she got severely hurt or even died. Ruth was shocked to know she was willing to die to help them and then asked her not to fight because he wouldn't accept anyone dying. Unlike Grit, who used them as tools and didn't care what happened to them, he needed brave warriors who understood their importance, didn't feel like a burden to the group, and whose deaths wouldn't matter. If she decided to see it this way, then she could fight. At that moment, Grit cast a spell that Nin and Lily stopped. Then Ruth used provocation to distract Grit for a moment so that Ceponime and Lilia could attack him. Grit was overly confident in his magic, but Luna used a spell to temporarily nullify his magical powers, allowing them to wound him. Ruth quickly cuffed Grit to seal his magic. Grit screamed in rage while an adventurers and soldiers struggled to fight off the numerous monsters. However, Hero Kylas arrived and motivated the adventurers to keep fighting and show their bravery. This surprised all the soldiers while Marius also displayed his abilities. The wizards managed to convince Ammon to fight by promising him plenty of food as a reward. He became very excited and created a giant tornado, which even made Ruth worried as it could damage the city. Then Ruth saw Grit on the ground and found it strange to see a gem on his chest because it did not belong to the Demon King. At that moment, he felt a very strong power coming from the portal and attacking him. Ruth managed to hold it off for a moment but had to redirect the attack due to its immense strength. From that magical field emerged another Grit who mocked them, saying that the one they had defeated was a replica of himself, albeit with his memories and some of his abilities. So it could be called the real Grit but was actually a homunculus with much lower power compared to himself. Grit then transformed into his true form and regretted that they wouldn't last long. Then he launched a spell with one finger that hit Ruth and threw him several meters back. Ruth, slightly dizzy, decided to use a substantial amount of mana to increase his strength and attack the Demon King, but the Demon King vanished in an instant and then struck him from behind. Ruth fell to the ground and shielded himself as he saw Grit preparing to attack him again. Then Nin created a magic rain that forced Grit to move from that spot. The twins decided to fuse and then attack Grit, who dodged their sword strike despite being hit by their spell. Ceponime tried to attack again, but Grit easily dodged without any trouble. Then Grit began to shout, further increasing his power. Ruth saw how in an instant Grit appeared in front of him, and the blow was so strong that it caused an explosion in the area. Ruth managed to withstand it, though he was shocked to realize that a single blow had destroyed more than half of his shield. Then the twins attacked while Nin healed Ruth. After a few seconds, Ruth decided he had to do something. He provoked Grit, which the twins used to their advantage to attack, but Grit summoned a magic attack that cancelled their fusion. Then Ruth decided to attack without wasting time and used Vital Conversion to double the 20,000 damage points he had received. After the explosion, the girls gathered near the twins as Ruth saw that Grit returned unscathed. Then, in less than a second, Grit appeared in front of him and struck him. Ruth fell to the ground and couldn't see clearly. He knew he had to increase his power even further. Then he started using more mana again, making his body grow from the immense power. He attacked Grit and managed to cut him with his sword, but he was thrown far back by a single blow. Despite this, Ruth did not give up, even though he had almost no shield left, and planned to use all his mana to use Vital Conversion so he could return all the damage he had taken. He jumped to attack, but Grit dodged and hit him with a blow so powerful that it completely shattered his shield. Then Grit flew into the sky, preparing a spell to finish off Ruth, who could only ask the girls to escape. However, at that moment, everything went dark. Ruth could only hear the girls suffering and tried to move, but he couldn't feel the mana in his body, and the pain was so intense that he couldn't do anything. He then saw how all the girls were injured and defenseless. Only Luna was still conscious, and she tried to attack Grit, who kicked her and then grabbed her by the neck, choking her. Ruth couldn't bear to see the girl he had saved suffering because she couldn't breathe and everyone he cared about losing their lives because of his mistakes. He forced himself to get up and decided to use everything he had without caring about the consequences. At that moment, his mana changed from blue to completely red, and something took over his mind. In a matter of milliseconds, he managed to reach Grit and with one punch, threw him against the wall. Nin opened her eyes, shocked to see Ruth in this condition because it was unlike his usual self. His face looked like it belonged to someone else. Ruth heard a voice commanding him to destroy everything, and then he became faster than before, managing to dodge, hit, and throw his enemy to the ground. The voice said it would continue to give him more mana so he could keep hitting the enemy repeatedly without stopping. This excited him because he greatly enjoyed the sensation. At that moment, someone called out to him, but Ruth turned without recognizing them and thought he should finish them off too. However, the person approached and then hit him with a bit of magic to restore his consciousness. Ruth regained his senses for a moment and saw his bloodied hands. He realized he was starting to lose control, and at that moment, his spirit broke free again. Ruth tried to control it but still heard the voice in his head telling him to finish everything off. He remembered Ammon's words, saying that if he couldn't control his power, he would turn into a monster. So, Ruth realized that the voice was not from someone else but himself and his dark desires brought to the limit by his anger. Therefore, he decided to start breathing calmly, and thanks to the person nearby, he managed to suppress it. The person was happy to help, and Ruth knew that he couldn't lose control but had to control himself and continue protecting his comrades because they couldn't lose more due to his mistakes. At that moment, Grit got up again, showing Ruth the situation in Avancha. Ruth asked the person not to stop casting healing magic and began to concentrate while looking at images of all his comrades and acquaintances fighting against numerous monsters. Nina accepted the request, and Ruth thought of everyone in his village. He then thanked Grit because, thanks to the images shown, he managed to detect everyone with his abilities. At that moment, he activated his sacrificial shield ability, making everyone on the battlefield receive a shield, and they were amazed because they felt the benefits without being nearby. Ruth shone thanks to all the shields he absorbed, and because of that, he now became the strongest tank in the world with an absorption rate of over 100,000 points. Then, using all the power of his shield, he launched towards the demon and used Vital Conversion, striking and throwing it out of the labyrinth, making a beam of light pierce the sky. After a few hours, at the entrance of Avancha, Manisha anxiously waited for her brother. Then, from a distance, she saw him walking slightly injured and ran towards him joyfully because her brother had made it out of the labyrinth alive. Ruth was also happy to see them again and thanked Marius and Ammon for leading the troops and saving all the citizens. Then, all the adventurers and soldiers gathered around him, congratulating him on successfully conquering the labyrinth in a short time. They also celebrated that their city had the strongest tank in the world. In the following days, Ruth and his friends spent time having fun and enjoying the peace, performing their respective duties and having time to enjoy a happier life. This was very pleasing for Ruth because previously, he was just an ordinary tank in the hero group, but now he had managed to become the protagonist in his own story and also the strongest tank. Therefore, he would continue to fight to protect the people who meant the most in his life, and thus, this first season ended.